Are your people following you, or are they just doing what you tell them? Will they go the extra mile, or are they just doing their job? More broadly, how could you make every conversation win hearts as well as minds? The answer is in becoming what I call more magnetic. As I've mentioned in a previous episode, there are two levers available to us as leaders if we want to pursue an exponential legacy of positive impact. We can become more strategic, focusing in on what really matters, and we can become more magnetic. You see, leadership is delivered one conversation at a time. And when you are being more magnetic, each conversation counts for more. You move things along further each conversation. But becoming more magnetic isn't something that happens by accident. So how actually can you grow your personal magnetism as a CEO or other senior leader? Welcome to the Impact Multiplier CEO, helping you to 10x your financials, 10x your positive impact, and 10x the fun you have along the way. I'm Richard Metcalf, and I coach some of the most extraordinary entrepreneurs and CEOs on the planet, from founders running disruptive startups to CEOs of billion-dollar businesses, on these very issues. And today I want to dive into this topic of being more magnetic. It's fascinating to me because it's so impactful and it gets to the very heart of our own way of being in the world. Let me start by talking about Georgina. You might have heard me mention her before. She was my sister. And she made friends and she inspired people deeply despite having zero productivity. So whilst I had straight A's at school, my sister had straight zeros. She was severely disabled mentally and physically. She couldn't speak. Actually, she needed 24-hour care. And yet she was inspirational. She was magnetic. People made friends with her. They loved her. They found her inspiring. And this is despite having zero productivity, didn't contribute to GDP, didn't hit any goals or targets. But what she had was determination, joy, and affection. And I think this is a great definition of what magnetism can look like. You see, she was determined. When she was about 20, she was paralyzed from the chest down, and she was in a hospital bed. She threw herself out of the bed after about 3 days and hauled herself down the corridor of the hospital ward, just using her arms, sheer willpower. Now, who does that? How many paralyzed people have you seen who throw themselves out of the bed and just start to move on their arms because they're so determined to go where they want to go? It's inspirational. She had a joy as well about her. And what was great, it was unfiltered, right? When she was happy, she was happy. She would let people see it. And she had an affection. Again, she could ignore people. She had autism. She could be in her own world. But then when she connected with you, you really felt her. You really felt the love she had for you and the connection. And you see, I see in my role as a coach to really high-level chief executives and entrepreneurs, I see many of these people who are focused on the paycheck, on the results, who are grinding it out day after day, and who are actually pretty emotionally closed. They've got a great plan, but they're not showing who they really are and inspiring people from that. It's not a recipe for magnetism. And the problem is that when people can't see that, they can't feel you in that way, you miss out on the incremental effort that otherwise they would bring. People do the task, but they're not necessarily going above and beyond. So this is why magnetism is so important. Let's look at those three elements I mentioned for Georgina and see how we can apply them to give us a formula to how to become more magnetic ourselves and 10x the impact of our conversations. So first of all, to be more determined, reconnect to your mission. So what do you stand for as a leader? Is it really clear? Are you really clear in every moment why you're there, what you want to stand for, beyond the goal of this quarter or this year? Do you know what you stand for? Do your people know what you stand for? What are you prepared to sacrifice for and take a hit for? What are your core beliefs that you will take a stand for, even if in the short term, it's not a pragmatic position? When people know that there's something deeper than surface level self-interest, they're drawn in. In my own example, there was a moment when I reinvented my business. I decided, actually, because of Georgina in many ways, I wasn't happy just to spend my life helping people get promotions or resolving tactical issues in their worlds. I'm determined I want to work with the world's top leaders to help them become a force for good at a scale they can't imagine. Because people like my sister need people who are talented, skilled, accomplished, have resources, have influence. They need those people like you perhaps, to make a difference in this world and not to just play it safe and secure, but to go big and to go bold. That's my mission. When I got clear about that, I reinvented my business around that goal. I actually took a financial hit in the short term. So I was saying no to certain clients, certain projects, certain opportunities. I had to actually learn a new skill set to really play at that different level. But it was worth it for the mission. Now, I offer many other resources around what it means like to connect to your mission and live on your mission in my newsletter, the X Quadrant Insider. So if you're not already subscribed, I would recommend that you head over to xquadrant.com/insider and sign up for that. Every week, I send a short article or a couple of links to key resources to help you do this, to connect to your mission and to live that mission. But over to you. What are you truly and deeply committed to? What's your leadership manifesto? And how can you remind yourself of that every single day? Next is to be more joyful and reconnect to the present. See, what drains you of joy? When I've spoken to my clients and other CEOs around this, often it's the extrinsic factors. It's things outside us. Something's gone wrong. We've got a difficult client, difficult team member. Business is not where it should be. We're worried about the future. These are things which are outside of us that can rob us of joy. What I've found is that if I put my focus on my business results, they go up and they go down. And if my joy is dependent on that, then I'm not in a great place to actually serve people at the level they need. What I've been learning is to tap inwards when I know that I'm okay as I am, that I'm enough, and that actually life is good, no matter what the current state of the business is. Then I'm actually free to have an impact, connect deeply with myself and with others, move them forward, serve them. And actually that creates the results that I want in the world as well. So intrinsic joy rather than extrinsic event-based happiness is a really, really important part of being magnetic. As Marshall Goldsmith said to me on a previous episode of this podcast, achievement and happiness are independent variables. In fact, I would actually argue that when we are happy and joyful, we can actually achieve more because we don't put a ceiling on our success. Because if we're grinding it out, why would we want to do even more? So to be more joyful, reconnect to that intrinsic joy, reconnect into the present. Often what robs us of joy is fear of the future, regrets about the past, and a story that we're telling ourselves about what's going on right now in the present. But if we just stop, lean back, and become aware of the present moment, we realize we can be joyful right now. This is the difference between serious and sincere. I ran a workshop recently called the Joyful CEO. And I turned up, the first few minutes, I turned up as what I called rocking rich. It was a bit of a joke. I turned up with like a long haired wig, electric guitar, shades, and did a whole little scene for a couple of minutes about this before running off camera and coming back as myself. Now, that was not very serious. That was a lot of fun, quite silly. But the reason I get away with it, if you like, is because I'm so sincere about what I stand for, the mission that I'm on. And so I can have fun. I don't need to take myself so seriously because I am genuine about what I'm trying to achieve in the world, and I put that out there. So where are you being too serious, and where can you instead move into being sincere, where actually the joy can bubble out that bit more? And the final thing we discussed in this workshop is what's a practice that you can have to reconnect with your own sense of fun in the present. I hope you're enjoying this conversation. This is just a quick interlude to introduce you to two transformative programs that we run. The first is Rivendell, my exclusive group of top CEOs who are committed to transforming themselves, their businesses, and the world. It's an incredible peer group and a deep coaching experience that will push you to new heights, no matter how successful you've already been. The second is Impact Accelerator, a coaching program for executives who are ready to make a big leap forward in their own leadership. It's regularly described as life-changing, and no other program provides such personal, strategic clarity, a measurable shift in stakeholder perceptions, and a world-class leadership development environment. Find out about both of these programs at xquadrant.com/services. Now back to the conversation. One thing I do in my workday is I have my guitar in my home office, my electric guitar. And sometimes when I feel that I need to get into my body more and reconnect back into the present, perhaps I'm getting taken out of the zone by emails and things coming in and I'm feeling, I'm losing the joy. I spend 3 minutes playing my guitar. It gets me into a different way of being. It gets me into my body, into the present moment, feeling the music. And just 3 minutes of that brings me back to a state of being, which is much more impactful. So what's your practice that can help you reconnect to this sense of the joyful? So over to you. What would become possible if you were more joyful in your leadership? And how can you generate joy internally instead of waiting for external events to go your way? Instead of being a slave to the good news and bad news that comes across all of our desks. Finally, to be more affectionate, I invite you to reconnect with others. As CEO, you have so much responsibility for goals, for outcomes, and for tasks. So much weight on your shoulders. And then there's people right in front of you. This call right now, this meeting right now. This is actually your immediate moment to be magnetic and to win them over. Sometimes all those goals and outcomes and tasks weigh us. They take us out of the moment. We're not present in the meetings. We're messaging on our phones, or we're stressed out, or we're not showing affection to the people in front of us. But as the phrase goes, let me rephrase that. As the saying goes, people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So get curious about the people in front of you before you switch into task mode. Slow down just that little bit and celebrate them and let them in to what's going on for you. This is not talking about putting all your stuff out there for all of your employees all of the time. But what I've learned is that humans, we're just desperate to feel the other person, to see them as people and not just as project management tools. So what can you share that's personal, even a little bit vulnerable? What just reveals who you are and what you're going through right now? It might just be the weekend you've had, the family meeting you had, the lunch you had with a friend. When I find I talk about deep things in my life, perhaps how my sisters inspired me, how my late mother inspired me, some of my imperfections, some of my little foibles and quirks. These things help me connect to the other person. So over to you. How can you show some affection to the people in your world today? Show them that you genuinely care. So magnetism, it's a choice and it's a muscle. You see, it's a choice in the moment to reconnect to your mission, to being in the present, and to connecting to the other person in front of you. It's a choice to actually leave behind your goals, your objectives, what you need to achieve in that moment, and focus on the connection between you and that other human being. And it's also a muscle for many of us that requires some courage. Many of us have grown up learning to be productive and drive results that way. But magnetism is a 10x lever. If we want to go beyond mere productivity, it requires us to show up with that new level of leadership, with that new level of influence, of magnetism. I mentioned in a previous episode my own journey of learning to expand my sense of being, from purely kind of focusing as the smart consultant to bringing more humor, to bringing more inspiration and mission and purpose, and bringing more fun and care to people. what I've found that as I do that, as I put my focus on helping every person in front of me connect to how can they change the world for good in their own way, when I become less focused on my own agenda and more focused on the person in front of me and serving them, then things have shifted for me. I've up-leveled the kind of clients I work with, the impact I have with those clients. It's a magnetism question. And as somebody who's a born strategist, that's been a real learning and a half for me. There's a time for thinking and planning, and there's a time for being deeply present. So, as we wrap up this episode, I want to leave you with a final question. What's one way that you can turn up the dial on your own leadership magnetism? Is it through being more determined and mission-focused, being more joyful and connected to yourself? Or is it being more affectionate and connecting deeply with the other people in front of you? I'd love to know.